Many non-Aboriginal families value their elders, but there is also a lot of disconnect where older people are relegated to old people's homes, ignored and forgotten and disrespected. Their knowledge and story and history, which have so much to give, means young people are missing out by not connecting to those older generations, and the old people are missing out as well. By contrast, Aboriginal culture is based on respect. Respect for the land, respect for their elders. Aboriginal elders are viewed as knowledge keepers. They are the cultural authority. They teach, uphold, and keep Aboriginal culture strong. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ironing Out the Wrinkles. I'm your host, Ros McMaster.
And I'm your other host, Kate Shaw. Together, we're taking the age out of ageism, helping men and women embrace the second stage of life with less fear. It seems we have a lot to learn from Aboriginal culture, and to help us make a start today, we're joined by Christine Luck. Christine is an Aboriginal woman with ancestral ties to Bundaberg, St. George and Prussia. She identifies as a Gurang woman with strong connections to Baffle Creek in the Port Curtis coast area. Christine grew up in Yarrawah country at Withcott and has lived in Brisbane in Turrbal country for the past 36 years. Christine, hello and welcome.
Hi Kate, hi Ros, and thank you for the welcome. Before we go any further, I'd like to acknowledge country. So I'm currently on Meanjin, which is the spur of the river, Maiwar, Brisbane River. I actually grew up on Darrawah country, as I said, in the bio, and currently reside on Turrbal country. So I'd like to acknowledge country and thank country also for offering support, guidance and sustenance over many generations. I'd also like to acknowledge my elders, past, present, and those who are coming behind us. May they also be leaders and strong advocates for people. I'd also like to acknowledge your elders, Ros and Kate, because it is how you got to be where you are today from their knowledges and wisdoms being shared as well.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that.
That was really special.
I love that extra bit of addition too. It just brings home the whole aspect of respect for the elders, doesn't it? You know, well, in culture too. But yeah, I've in the address to country, I've never heard that added to the end, and I love it.
So when you meet together with people that you've never met with before, you offer acknowledgement to country. Country is a person. Country doesn't just necessarily mean earth. It also means sky. It also means water, because that whole sphere of where we live, we are in country, on country, and of country at all times. So we acknowledge that country helps us to be, full stop. So I guess to answer your question, what makes an Aboriginal elder? I think you mentioned it when you introduced. An elder is a knowledge keeper, or someone who is respected for the knowledges that they advise on, experience on, and guidance on a particular issue, subject, or, just a person's life. So, within my family, there are a number of elders. I'm now considered an elder, even though I don't think I should be an elder, but I do get called the title of auntie now. And that's not just because I have grey hair. It is actually because I do have some knowledges in the work that I've done over a number of years. So I get the title of auntie.
That's a great honour, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And, I kind of balked at the idea of being called auntie. But I have a number of, because I have other people in my life and people that I work with that I would also consider an elder, because they knowledge keepers and are able to share that knowledge and guide people in the work that they do. And they aren't people with grey hair. So, an elder isn't necessarily because you have grey hair. An elder is someone who is a keeper of knowledge and someone who is willing to share that in community.
So a keeper of knowledge being what knowledge? Where's this knowledge come from?
Well, I guess, it's specialized skills. So if I talk about medicine, if I talk about crafting tools, if I understand the seasons, if I understand the familial connections, it's a specialized skills, a little bit like you would have specialized skills for a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher. So it's specialized skills that a person has, and they're able to impart that knowledge to others freely, and they are sought after because they have those knowledges. So that's kind of my understanding, and I guess the understanding in community of what an elder is.
And well, can I ask why you thought you didn't deserve the role or weren't worthy of the role?
Well, I guess it was unexpected because, over time we gain skills, but we don't necessarily think the skills we've got are anything special.
Mhm.
But, in the recognition of the title of auntie now, I probably am more comfortable with the idea that, yes, in fact, I do know things and I can actually help out in situations, and I can offer those specialised services to the work that I do.
It's amazing what others recognise in us that we don't see in ourselves, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what happens in the role of an elder? Do you meet at a community hall and people come to you for advice? Like how does the role get played out?
Well, there are elders groups. There is a Brisbane Aboriginal elders group in Brisbane, but I guess the role of elder is that the people who work with you recognise that you probably have some skills and knowledges that they could tap into if they have a question. There is no special meeting place. There is no special place to be. You just are, consulted or referred to if people want advice or are seeking information.
Yeah, and the community sort of are made aware of what your skill is as the elders. So,
They come to you,
yeah, come to you for the art and craft and
whatever
yeah.
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 Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Are elders still held in high regard by youth today? Certainly for non-Indigenous culture, there used to be a lot more respect
Yeah.
for the wisdom of older people. Are you finding that with the young Indigenous Aboriginals, that they're not as respectful as what they were in the past? Or is that still, and are they still held accountable, and it's just born into them that they need to be respectful?
My observation is that that's still a respectful position, and deference is still given to an elder. It could just be because of the grey hair, but the title sometimes is conferred upon you, and other times it just naturally is your title. But I do find that younger people still say, "I'm sorry, auntie," or refer to you as auntie or uncle, and aren't quite as dismissive of what you have to offer. They will defer. I still see that level of respect and observation of respect in our community and other, workplaces, non-workplaces as well.
Does that differ from the country to the city kids, or is it generally the
No,
same?
and it's generally the same. I haven't seen anything different
Oh, that's
um,
good.
from my own observations. Yeah.
And are elders now using modern techniques to reach the younger generation? Like through video or music or TikTok?
Not necessarily, no. No. It still tends to be more of a yarn. I mean, modern technology just allows you to reach a bigger audience, I guess. Elders don't necessarily go out and say, "Hey, look at me, I've got things to say, and I'm going to tell everybody by, TikTok video or YouTube clips or podcasts or whatever." It still tends to be very much a community centered activity, and still very much a yarn situation. So, you would sit, listen, and yarn to people.
Because our
Yeah.
international guests might not be familiar with the term yarn, and that's really another word. Is that another word for story or what?
It's a bit of both storytelling and also just a conversation. So, having
Okay.
a yarn is a sharing of, I guess, your knowledges and skills, and having a conversation at the same time. So, when you have a yarn, you actually sit down together and you talk together. You don't talk out, you talk with in that
Well, I think
place.
that brings me a segue into saying, even with, I've noticed with our advertisers, for instance, Qantas, which is our flagship airline in Australia, they've seemed to have gone to a lot of trouble to advertise the right way. They ran a very successful campaign, I Still Call Australia Home, from 1997 to 2009. And one of their commercials featured an Aboriginal boy called Tyra's Aunt. And he sang a rendition of the first verse of the song so beautifully in his native Aboriginal language. And it sort of showed to us that they had huge respect in preparing this clip. And apparently they consulted widely with the Aboriginal community by regarding the use of the song and filming and getting permission to have access to the location on their land. That was good to see, wasn't it? It just seems like I felt really proud, even though I'm not Aboriginal. So it was nice that they'd been consulted and respected.
Tyrus probably would have been grounder if he'd just gone ahead and sang the song in language without having the permission to do so by his community.
Oh, okay.
So, he would have had to have consulted quite widely himself,
Right.
not just Qantas doing it. And the fact that his community supported it and saw the benefit and value of it meant that Qantas were going about the consultation in the right way. That is,
Yes.
having a yarn and getting permission to utilise knowledges and skills. I mean, we see, intellectual property being ripped off everywhere, and language usage and art usage and, material goods usage
Yes.
is intellectual property. So, the fact that he went and spoke to his community, his elders, and got permission to do so is the correct way of doing things. So, yes,
Yes.
I'm
That's great.
with you. I mean, I have been observing some of the changes around country anyway, and noticed that there is now quite a few programs on the ABC and SBS, and they actually name country from where they're meeting. So, if you were talking about where you were from, like I did, I'm currently on Turrbal Yagara country, and having that acknowledged as being a place other than the name of Brisbane. So, it's really encouraging, exciting to see across our whole community.
Do you think it's also encouraging that the young today, I've noticed some really popular songs, pop songs are now featuring Aboriginal singers, and they're actually in their Aboriginal native language, which is beautiful. And the books and the kids' books and things
Yes.
like that. Yes.
Yeah, it is nice to be able to see some of that occurring. I mean, I guess in a way we have all missed out on a lot of our own knowledges and histories, not just me as an Aboriginal person, but everybody, by not having it available or encouraged or valued in Australia.
Yes.
And that, to see that now encouraged and valued is really exciting.
Yes.
I remember when I was studying psychology, and we had to do some research at a community centre down in Inala, and there was a big Tongan community down in Inala. And when it came to youth offences, youth sort of juvenile offences, the police very much worked in conjunction with the Tongan elders. And a lot of the discipline then was left to the Tongan elders because they had their own way of dealing with their youth. So does that happen with Aboriginal elders as well?
It hasn't in the past. That is getting changed. I mean, there are things called Murray courts now, where elders are invited to come and sit in the court system and talk with offenders about, what's gone on and, to sort of correct the behaviour so it's the right way of doing things. It may not necessarily sit well with what we consider to be the proper way of doing things. Proper and right aren't always the same thing.
Oh,
So
our justice system and youth are so out of control. So we clearly don't have a right way of doing things.
No, we need help.
So yeah.
We can learn maybe from you guys, that's for sure. Getting back to the Aboriginal culture, how are the elderly treated? For instance, is there a hierarchical,
Hierarchical.
Oh, here I can't even speak, I'm so excited. Is there no single leader, as the early explorers assumed who came to Australia? Because elders can hold a lot of power. And in some communities, men and women are elders with equal standing, and in others, it may be just a few men who have that status. How's that worked out? Would you know? Or is it just different in different places?
it was different in different places. Yeah,
Mm.
it depended really on, I guess, how country shaped that division. I've sort of examined this a little bit over time, is that difference in political leadership was so vastly different in places, and that's why it was assumed that there was no governance, no leadership, nothing in a particular location, because there wasn't this head person. And having a head person fitted the ideal of a hierarchy that came from England, where there's a head person making the decisions, as opposed to having a situation where everybody sat and made those decisions jointly in a family situation. Over time, obviously, that's altered a little bit, but we still have a situation where you can't just be the only person that will speak on behalf of that community. It has to still be a consensus arrangement. No one can go out and say, hey, look at me, I know everything, therefore you just talk to me about it. Because as soon as you do that, you've now broken the rule of respect, and you've also broken the rule of acknowledging that other people also have knowledges in that space, and it's not just you alone. Hence the reason why I mentioned earlier, I'm a little bit uncomfortable just being asked as the only person that has this knowledge.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How beautiful. I like that. We Westerners could learn a thing or two about that.
Are there consequences to breaking the rule of respect?
Yeah, it's called exclusion or shunning.
Oh,
And it
Wow.
happens, it still occurs in, what would be considered modern society these days. If someone is given undue authority and they haven't been recognised to own that authority in community, they don't really get invited along to a lot of community things, and they're actively shunned within community until that person recognises that they're actually not the authority alone in a particular space. There are others who could add value to a conversation. They can continue on their merry way, oblivious to whatever's going on, but community will actually shun them from activities.
Wow. Okay.
so there's consequences. You've got to
Yeah.
behave properly and respectfully to
Yes.
be part of the community. With older members, are they still feeling very important to family functioning, like the Aboriginal grandparents? Elderly family members and elders often assume multiple roles within families and communities. Not so much in our Western anymore, because a lot of us are separated from our families, interstate, etc., overseas. And what are the mutual benefits and things like that?
Well, if I use my own family, like I live close to a number of aunties, my mother's sisters. And the reason why I live close to them is because they are considered my grandmothers, my mothers as well. And it would be wrong of me not to offer support and assistance if
It's lovely.
required. My auntie actually had her mother's brother living with her for a number of years, until he also grew frail and old and passed away. I do, however, have one uncle who is in a home. Unfortunately, he has high care needs, but he's not left in a home. He is visited quite often by cousins, by nieces, nephews, sisters, and taken out quite regularly to family functions and activities. It's just that his needs were more than we were able to assist and offer with. I've observed that across other families as well. There are very few instances that I know of where a person has actually been put into an aged care facility. We're not unique as a culture in that regard. I know within my husband's family, who are Italian, that situation didn't occur either, unless a person was needing specialised care and assistance and support. I guess within my own family, my mother lives in a small house surrounded by my brother and two sisters as well. So she is not just there on her own.
Is it common for several family members to live together like they do in the Asian countries?
Not as common as living all in the one house, but certainly living close by each other, yes.
And I imagine also the elderly Aboriginal grandparents would be wonderful in keeping the spirit of Aboriginal culture alive.
Sharing of stories is really critical there.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, I do
love
too.
it.
It's a shame we've sort of lost all that, isn't it? Oh, a lot of us have, not everybody, but
Yeah.
in my case, I have my family live far away.
I guess the other thing too is we still have big families. One or two children is still very unique within
Really?
the community. 4 or more is still the common sort of family structure.
And isn't it, I think I went to the football game. It was an Aboriginal football game down the coast, and I was with an Aboriginal girl, and everybody she bumped into was her brother and her sister. But they're not actually brothers and sisters, are they? Why is everybody a brother and a sister?
I guess because of the close family ties,
Oh,
really.
that's so nice. I love that.
And also the recognition of community in that space. I have lots of brothers and sisters, even though technically on paper I've got one brother and 4 sisters. But, I have close cousins who I would consider my brothers and sisters. In a way, it's still that existence of the obligation processes that existed prior to colonisation. It still exists in parts of Australia, still exists in some form or other within those parts that have been heavily colonised over the years. And it's that system of connection to each other. So you probably have, you may have heard that that's my, cousin, but my cousin's cousin kind of thing. We're not blood, but we're cousins. So I've got a number of community cousins as well because of the family ties that we have.
It's so nice. It's like a really lovely, warm feeling of belonging, isn't it? What would you say are the 4 important aspects, or maybe there's more or less, but at least 4 of the Aboriginal culture? Like I know family, you just said's one.
I guess, yeah. So if I was to look at it in the sense of place first, relationships, respect, and sharing probably is the other. If I was to look at least 4 aspects, a sense of place means knowing where you're from, how you're connected to everything there, and knowing how you're connected to everybody there. Relationships is, I guess, that further bonding of your obligations in that space. Respect is making sure that you respect the protocols, the rules, the arrangements of engagement. They're kind of critical, really. And then sharing of knowledge is because people have to know about things to be able to look after them. So if you keep it all to yourself, how are people going to know?
How does spirituality help Aboriginal families cope with challenges? I know I've read a bit about how wonderful the elders are when there's a funeral. Families and communities who engage in spiritual practices get lots of benefits, don't they?
Emotionally,
Yes,
emotional
support
benefits.
yes.
Yeah, it's more the support. I guess spirituality has its different aspects of understanding too. It still comes back to that relationship stuff, being there if someone needs to talk to you
When they're
and not,
grieving and things like that.
yeah, and not imposing or, constantly saying, look, I'm here to help you, I'm here to help you, which really, if a person's not willing at that point in time to talk to you, then it's not about you supporting them. It's about you wanting to have your own way. So, it's back to that connectedness, that relationship stuff is critical.
Yeah. We actually had a researcher from James Cook University, and they'd done studies on Indigenous health and wellbeing, and they were saying a holistic approach to Indigenous health involved the connection to community and spirituality in the land, and it was vital to the health of older Aboriginal peoples. Made a big difference.
As we
Yes,
said
it does.
before, when we were talking, your culture is one of the oldest existing cultures in the whole world, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah,
I
I've
haven't
read
fully
that.
examined that, but I believe so.
I've been
yes.
reading that in my research. I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful that you can share that knowledge with us today.
Well, I was going to say, does that make you like feel really amazing and special? But you're not allowed to have that kind of ego, I imagine, as an elder.
No, I'll just be cool. I'll be told I have a big head if I do.
You'd be pulled into line. Yeah.
I mean, there's no harm in feeling special about that. I mean, it just means that you are well grounded in place. It was one of the things that has, I guess, been the saddest part of the removalist policies of the early 1900s and into, the late 1900s, and still today, if, we don't continue to connect people back to their communities, back to their families, it shatters that whole idea of who you are and how you are connected to place. And there are, innumerate studies that talk to how that impacts your health mentally and physically.
I know this doesn't have anything to do with being older. How are we going with the fight to change the date of Australia Day? Are we getting any closer to seeing a resolution there or an agreement?
For our international guests, there's a lot of controversy about Australia Day. Got a name? Will I say what it is?
Invasion Day.
Invasion Day, yeah.
I left you to say it.
That's
for
okay.
us.
Invasion Day. Look, the debate is still ongoing. There's a lot of emotion attached to the day, whether you're for it or against it. And unless you sit and have long yarns about the situation, what it means to people, the impact it has on people, we probably won't get to a resolution very quickly or easily. And it really means that until we actually sit and have that yarn and continue to have the yarn until at such point in time we agree, either way, we will just have a divided idea on what, January 26th is.
I think that's a lovely way to finish the discussion today, Christine, unless you've got some lovely other words of wisdom to share with our listeners.
I guess, grey hair doesn't make you old.
I like that.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is because one day I dropped my youngest child off and his friend said to him, "Hey, I saw that your gran dropped you off today." He was trying to think, at what point in time did his nana drop him off at school? And then he realised that his friend was referring to me. He was most insulted and upset.